Hello, my name is Demetrius Daniel, and this is my Harvard confessional for the meeting that we had yesterday, surrounding the topic of our quotes that we chose the day before from the book Miseducation of the Negro, chapters 1 through 5. Now, it was a really good meeting, and it was not exactly what I expected, but I was expecting going in there thinking, okay, I've got to have my sources ready, got to have my quote ready, and I'm going to have my explanation of my quote. And those are all very useful in the topics that we talked about. Now, let's talk about first my quote, obviously, that I chose for the meeting. And my quote was a quote that I think a couple of other people chose. I think Tashira also chose it, and I know that Tadawa chose it as well. And it was, as another has well said, to handicap a student by teaching him that his black face is a curse and that his struggle to change his condition is hopeless is the worst sort of lynching. Now, I chose this quote because it is an amazing example of miseducation. These young, capable black children are being told in their school that they cannot be whoever they want to be, and they can only be so much. Like, they are being told in the same building and classroom that they learned math and English and basics of science in the world, that they can also are inferior and can only be so much. And that is horrible. And then these children, when they're being told this at school the entire day, they go home and some children see what their teacher just told them, but in real life. Because they come home and their parents are only so much, because their parents before they were taught the same thing when they were in school. And then their parents taught the same thing when they were in school. So that's all they saw. And so it's a horrible cycle of miseducation that's going down and furthering and ruining generations of children and black excellence. And so when a child is told they're inferior, not only in school, but also at home, they begin to think that that's really all they can be, right? Like, not only are they being told it at school all day, but when they come home, they're told it, and when they go back to school, that's all they think. So eventually it's gonna really sink into their soul that that's really all they can be when it's really not, right? Another thing we talked about later was a quote that was later in the chapter, and it was about the educated Negro growing sour. Now, this also helps cement the miseducated Negro children in a hopeless place, because all they see around them is miseducated people. The educated Negroes are not going back, and they're not showing these young kids that there's more for them besides drugs and gangs, right? They're not showing them these things. They're not coming back and trying to help them. That's all they see, and if that's all they see, then that's all they think they can do, right? And this shows that just because one makes it, it doesn't make up. They don't represent a major part of the culture of the community, right? Especially if they don't bring the rest with them, right? Like, that's what, like, Mr. Fleming said while we were in the meeting. He said, "You made it. You made it, so it's possible for other black peoples to make it. But just because one makes it, that doesn't mean everybody else can as well. So it's not unless you go back and you pick them up and take them with you and help others like you, then it can equate to a bigger part of the community. If you can go back and help others that are less fortunate and more miseducated. And there's a reason why the educated Negro does this. And they do this because they are afraid of the white people, and they want to remain on their good side. He wants to show that he is one of them. He's like, oh no, I'm not like one of those Negroes. I'm not like them. I'm educated. I'm like you guys. But this is not good, and it's not good for many reasons. One of them is it's lonely at the top. It's something that Miss B likes to say a lot. That it's lonely at the top, so you should always bring others with you, right? And so they're only doing it for themselves. And what good does it do? Does it matter if you have one black person, he goes up there and he's with the whites, and then he does nothing, and then he dies? He has no legacy behind him. He did not help other people so that he can continue a legacy of his own, of Black excellence. He can't. He just goes there and then he dies, and then he was like, oh yeah, that was that one Negro that made it. But he didn't do anything to help others. He didn't make a long-lasting connection behind him. So his work that he did for himself was essentially useless, right? We also talked about how lynching mentally is worse than being lynched physically. And this is because if you're lynched physically, or if I lynched physically, you're dead, right? You die once. It's a quick over. But when you're lynched mentally, every day you are forced to the same hopelessness and death. Every day you're dying. It's multiple death. It's multiple until you actually die, right? And you're bound to this life of uselessness and hopelessness because you were miseducated, because you were lynched mentally when you were younger, right? And so you don't have any freedom. And that was another thing that we talked about, having freedom socially, but not as a whole. Like, we have freedom on paper. Technically, we are free, but we can't do anything with that freedom. We don't have money. We don't have any kind of good jobs. We don't have any ability to actually do anything with that freedom. So we are bound to thievery and drugs and gangs and all sorts of poor jobs. So in reality, we are still not free, but on paper we are. So that's something. There were also some words that were said in the meeting that I did not know the meaning to. And so I wrote them down, and then after the meeting, I went and I looked them up because I didn't know what they meant. And they will be brought up later in other meetings, so I wanted to know what they meant. And one of those was fallacy, and it means a mistaken belief, especially when based on unsound argument. And so now I know. And there's also a caveat, which I did also not know how it was spelled, but now I know. And it is a warning or proviso of specific stipulations, conditions, or limitations. So now I know what both of those words mean. And there are a couple of ways why the Harvard Diversity Project classroom differs from other classrooms or regular classrooms in many ways. In this class, I feel like the students talk more than in regular classes, right? In other usual classes, like in the school that I go to, you have the teacher is talking, and then every once in a while he'll ask the student a question just to make sure that they're understanding the topic, and then they'll answer, and they'll be like, good job, and they will continue lecturing, right? And then the students, they sit there and they just take notes, and they're like doing all that stuff. But I feel like we talk more, and we talk about our mind and physiology more than you would in a normal classroom. I think that's pretty good. I feel like students in this classroom are not as afraid to be wrong, or at least that's how it should be, is that we shouldn't be afraid to be wrong in this classroom, because it's not gonna help you. Because if let's say I had something that I wanted to say, and then I said it, and it was wrong, right? Now, Miss B and Mr. Fleming, now you know that I don't know what I'm talking about, and so now you can be like, okay, no, let's get you on the right track. And so if I say something and I speak my mind, it either is right or it's wrong, or it's not on the right track, right? So it's good to speak out either way, because you're either wrong and now they can help you so that you now understand, and they would have never known that you were wrong if you hadn't speak out, and they would have just assumed that you knew what you were talking about, and then it's gonna come up later and you're not gonna know what you're saying, and they're gonna be like, I thought you knew. It's like how Mr. Fleming brought up about the running analogy, where he was like, okay, I'm gonna be running and I'm gonna be expecting you guys behind me. So let's say I'm running behind him, and then I slow down a little bit and there's a hurdle right there, and he thinks that I know how to jump that hurdle, but when I get to the hurdle, I fall. And he's like, hey, I thought you knew what you were doing. I thought you knew. Why didn't you tell me so that I could help you get over the hurdle? And I would have been like, oh, I was afraid to be wrong. Well, now look at me, now I fall. Now I'm on the floor because I didn't say anything when I was supposed to. And also, even if you are correct, then now you know that you're correct rather than having somebody else do it. Like, I know that happened a couple of times to me during the meeting. I would Miss B or Mr. Fleming would like ask a question, or they would ask us to explain something, and then a couple times I knew what the question answer was, or I knew how to explain it, but I was afraid of being wrong, so I, bit my tongue. I didn't say anything, and somebody else would be like, "Oh yeah, it's like this," and I'd be like, "Oh, I knew it. I knew I was right." But now nobody else knows that I'm right because I didn't say anything. So either way, saying what's on your mind and saying what you think, either way is good. So you should always do it, unless you're just, well, you don't want to say something stupid though, but you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's some ways that I feel like it's different. Some things that I learned in that meeting were that you need to know when a literary work is published so that you can know the context of the story. It's a lot different, the context of a story, based on when the book was written, right? And so that's something that you always want to know when going into a book. You always want to know when it's published, so have a context of when it is, because different words might mean different things depending on when it was made at, right? Another thing is understanding and knowing every single word when you're reading a book, because if you don't know what a word means, how are you going to understand the sentence then? How are you going to understand the paragraph? How are you going to understand the book if you don't know what some words mean? Like two words can mean extremely different things if it's taken out of context, right? Like how we were talking about the how during the quote it was like, oh yeah, it's said to be blah 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 blah, right? Some people may think, oh, it's said to be blah blah, okay, then that means that it's this. No, it was sarcastic. It was saying that everybody thinks that it's like this, when in reality it isn't. And so knowing what specific words or sentences mean when going into a book extremely change the context, and you have a further understanding of what the sentence or the book actually means. Going into, let's say how I talk about how I felt. So I was kind of stressed going into it because I wasn't sure if I had picked the right quote. I wasn't sure if I had picked the right explanation for the quote, if I really was thinking hard enough, if I had enough resources. And I really was just very nervous. I know some others were too, because we were talking about it in the private chat about what we were doing. I mean, no shade, but you know what I mean. And so I was kind of nervous, and I was like, I don't know if I'm prepared, but I felt prepared, but I wasn't sure if I picked the right things. And so I was just very nervous of being wrong, especially wrong in front of other people, because I don't like being embarrassed. I don't like being embarrassed in front of everyone. I don't like being pranked. I don't like being whatever. I've never liked it, and I still don't. But I have to get over the fear of being wrong, because I don't know everything, and I'm not expected to know everything. So I shouldn't have to think that I must know everything and that I must never be wrong. That shouldn't be a thought process in my head. I should be able to think, okay, I was wrong. Now I know. And you should always want to seek out information if you know that you're wrong. There's no issue with being wrong, right? I just said that nobody is perfect, nobody knows everything, but knowing that you're wrong and not trying to go out and seek the correct information that you were wrong about, that's not okay, right? Because then you're gonna just remain wrong. You're gonna remain not knowing anything. So overall, I actually really liked the meeting today. I kind of taught me a lot of things. It taught me a lot of things about the classroom, how it's gonna be like. It taught me that I need to get over my fear of being wrong and to almost embrace it, because being wrong is good sometimes, because you can learn from your mistakes and now you can be right. So that was it. My name is Demetrius Daniel. Thank you for listening to my confession about the meeting yesterday. Peace.